folks sitting in the chairs, so I think we're going to get started since it's after 10. And we have a report this morning about Ide Mill Road or Ade Mill Road. Let's put that to bed today so we know exactly what we're supposed to be calling it. AMR is what the cool kids say. And just an update in advance of our bonding vote on our 5-year plan and our road construction projects for 2020. So we had asked and requested just to have a report on where we're at in this process and get a chance for the council members to ask questions. And then, of course, in a week, I think it's a week, we will have the report at the city council meeting and opportunity for more input at that time. So we welcome our Public Works Director, Kathy Lantry, and I look forward to your presentation. We don't have advanced materials, so I can't preview what's about to come. So welcome and thank you for being here today.
Council President Brenmo and council members. Actually, I'm going to have Randy hand out. We have some cross sections just as a little bit of a visual that are about the configuration. I actually just have some comments to make, and then we can certainly do questions. As many of you know, we have been talking about Ide Mill Road for many, many years. And for a little bit of context, the road was last had a mill and overlay in 2003. And the underlying concrete, what we've discovered in some of our research, is that the underlying concrete is actually in pretty good shape. There has been an issue for years with water standing on the road, especially near Grand Avenue, because there's a spring there, so the road never really dries out. And also because this road has been in flux for so many years, the traffic signals that are there are actually temporary signals. So that is where we are today, and what I want to talk to you about is where we want to go. I will be giving you a high-level overview, but I have staff here who's available to answer any other questions as well, should something come up that I absolutely can't answer. So the original goals with this project were to resurface the road, add a bike and ped facility, improve drainage, and improve lighting. In order to achieve these goals, we are recommending a road configuration that has 1 northbound and 2 southbound lanes. The bikeway would be separated from the northbound lane by a concrete curb. This is the plan that will be outlined within the 5-year plan that comes before you in a public hearing at the 5:30 portion of your meeting on February 19th as part of the bond sale. We chose the southbound lanes, the 2-lane option going southbound, because most of the ramps are on that side of the road. So from a practical standpoint, it certainly made sense. I know that there have been some concerns that have been raised about the separation between vehicular and non-vehicular traffic on the northbound lane. And for a vast majority of the section, vehicular traffic will be separated by at least by 6 feet along that road. The engineers have taken a look at it. They don't have safety concerns with that configuration. The 3-lane configuration will cost more than the original $5.2 million estimate, which was developed with little engineering. And as with all projects, as the design got further developed, certain additions were made to meet our project goals. The current estimate for the 3-lane configuration is $7.5 million. The biggest cost drivers of this difference are the amount of sewer work to be done and the addition of lighting. There are some elements of the work on Ide Mill Road that should be done regardless of whether or not we add a bike ped facility. The mill and overlay is beyond needed. And if we want to get the longest life out of this treatment, we also need to get the water off the road. The 3-lane configuration has significantly more sewer work than we had originally anticipated, and we recommend this work be done regardless of the addition of the bike ped facility. Also, because the signals are considered temporary, they should be replaced. Our estimate of $7.5 million is indeed still an estimate. It has not gone out for bid, and we have included a 25% contingency and a 25% of engineering costs for this project, which adds up to about $2.5 million of the $7.5. That is standard in all of our projects. So from a financing standpoint, here's how we were suggesting that it gets financed. Out of the 7.5, 5.9 is all bonding. It's the repayment of those bonds that I want to talk through with you. So the 3.5 million was part of a plan that this council passed originally. So that was funded through general fund resources. Then we had an additional $1.7 million. The annual debt service on that is about $200,000 and planned to come from the bike ped $500,000 annual allocation. An additional $700,000 in bonding would be financed by municipal state aid bonding forward of about $90,000. And then the balance of 1.6 from the sewer fund. In order to advance this plan, Public Works plans on doing the following, and all of this will be codified in the February 19th resolution that you will see before you. We will host a neighborhood informational meeting, likely sometime the beginning of April. We will be directing our consultant to do traffic modeling, which will forecast likely diversion routes using current traffic information. This is not a traffic study, as we fear a full traffic study will cost north of $200,000 and delay the project into 2021. Public Works will propose an additional $200,000 in the 2021 budget to be used for mitigation of traffic concerns if needed. The most likely improvements that we would make would have to do with signal timing and things like phasing for left turn arrows in surrounding roads. Public Works will offer to attend district council meetings at the adjacent district councils that border the road. We're hopeful that some of them will combine their efforts to save on a little bit of staff time. And finally, Public Works will bring forward a repayment plan for the bonds. I've described our current plan for bond repayment, but if bids for our 2020 projects come in more favorably, we'd like to be able to use that because it's already been budgeted for bond repayment through the general fund, those adjustments of paying for it out of MSA funds and the bike ped fund would be adjusted. All that would come before this council as a final financing plan prior to work commencing on the road. And I'm happy to stand for any questions.
It's a lot of information, and none of it is in writing. So it's, as we digest this, I'm sure there'll be questions. Ms. Naker.
Thank you. Director Lantry, you mentioned that some of the cost of the $7.5 million is not for the addition of the proposed bikeway, but would be necessary or highly recommended anyway, the mill and overlay and then the sewer work to make that mill and overlay last longer. Mm-hmm. Can you break down how much the mill and overlay and sewer work would be on its own, and then also on its own how much the cost of making those temporary signals permanent would be?
Yep. Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, I asked the exact same question. The breakdown that we have is a little bit intermixed, and part of this is because when we look at the cost to add the trail, excuse me, on the northbound lane, included in that is the mill and overlay for that one lane. So pulling out all of that information to get, like, how much does it actually cost to do all the work absent the bike lane? Is I think part of what your question is, right? And so trying to figure out how to separate all of that would take a fair amount of deconstructing our current estimates so that we could pull out those things. As I say, we would mill and overlay, even if we were not doing any bike or ped improvements on this road, we would mill and overlay all 4 lanes. So that work would be done regardless. And right now it's embedded in the northbound lane for the bike ped facility. So we'd have to pull that out. I would estimate the lighting is a little bit easier because lighting, right now the lighting is all on one side of the road and would not shed enough light to that bike ped facility. So we would have to add lighting. That's about $1 million to add lighting on that section of road.
Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. And I was furiously trying to jot down the new financing and couldn't keep up, so I will also be trying to get my questions answered. So in a previous iteration of the vision for the new roadway, I recognize it was maybe not necessarily formal city documents, but it was more kind of like in concert with groups and with the community, and a lot of council members did support, was 2 lanes only for cars, and then 2 lanes for the trail and the bikeway and the pedestrian. And so what we're seeing today is a proposal for what's still ultimately like a 4-to-3 conversion. I'm roughly sort of thinking about it in my brain like that, which is a reduction of car traffic, which I think is overall good in the direction we need to go in, but it's also kind of different from a lot of what's been talked about. And then there's a cost associated with that. And like, I would like to understand, and I know there's a lot of pieces in the financing and there's a lot of weird like circular cycles of how we make it work, but what's the difference in cost between what that vision would have been, like 2 lanes, the other 2 are the bikeway, and then what this is, and what were the considerations in arriving at this, not just on unanticipated cost, but other? That would be helpful for me to figure out how we got here.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, the difference between the proposal that's before you is the straight up 2-lane conversion, 2 lanes for bike and ped on the northbound lane, 2 lanes opposing traffic on the south, what's currently southbound. The cost for that was about $9.8 million. And so because that cost was steeper than anticipated, and that had mainly to do with having to construct a lot of new road bed so that we could add left turn lanes so that the queue up for the lights wouldn't back traffic up for a very long distance. So we had to do a lot of construction in order to accommodate that queuing. And that meant that basically we were constructing new road in the median. So we decided that $9.8 million was certainly more than we had anticipated. Closing the gap to 7.5 required some effort as well. So thinking about $9.8 million, basically the conversation was, can we achieve our project goals and do it in a way that costs less and still achieves those goals? And so the 7.5 million, and in some ways is a compromise from people who were concerned about where all the traffic would be ending up. So the cost was the big driver. And finding a way to finance $9.8 million was really just going to be a very, very difficult task. It wasn't achieve this goal with price as no object. So when we took a look at that, then we started talking about what are other configurations that we could look at that could achieve those goals. And that's how we got to a 3-lane.
Can I clarify? And I do feel like this, maybe you've already answered this twice, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding. In order to do a straight up mill and overlay, would require us to not do the sewer work that you're talking about and other pieces that would be essentially necessary in order to make the mill and overlay a meaningful construction project. So we're basically saying in order to do even if we just did 4 lanes of mill and overlay, we would have to do the sewer and lighting work to replace the temporary lights and to do the sewer infrastructure that isn't there currently, and that wouldn't normally be part of or wouldn't necessarily be part of a typical mill and overlay.
Council President Brenmo, that's correct. Certainly, our first estimate was 3.5 to do a straight up mill and overlay with very little other work. One of the things that we've been doing for the past couple of years with our mill and overlay work is we don't just mill and overlay. One of the things that that the council is aware of as well is that part of what we look at when we do a mill and overlay is how can we increase safety for pedestrians and bikes. So that has become part of our work when we look at a mill and overlay. So certainly we could do a mill and overlay and not do any sewer, not do the lights. We don't think that we could get the life out of a mill and overlay if we continue to have that sort of water penetration that is not good for keeping pavement intact. But certainly, if all else fails, could we use $3.5 million and do a mill and overlay? Yes.
But that would be not including any pedestrian or
That's correct.
Safety improvements either.
It would not meet our project goals.
Okay, and I'm just trying to look, So straight up mill and overlay, sounds like, kind of throwing money out the window in some ways, is $3.5 million. Right now, you're saying about 7.5 is the plan B with the 2 southbound and 1 northbound. 9.8 is what it would have cost if we would have, and this is based on preliminary engineering, 9.8 is what it would have cost if we would have gone ahead with the 2 lanes south, well, taking the one going 2 lanes and then adding the bike ped on the other side of the median. So that's 9.8. And is there something in between that's like the $5.5 million? Is that like a mill and overlay with some of the improvements?
Council President Brenmo and council members, certainly we could you could have a menu of things to say we're going to do a mill and overlay at 3.5. We could add sewer work, add 1.6. The signal changing, we could add that. Certainly you could do that and just say at what point do we get to a number that we could agree upon. That certainly is an option.
I guess, and mostly, I realize that. I guess I'm trying to figure out like what really is an option and what isn't an option, because my understanding, based on what I've heard from my colleagues and what I know from the reports that you presented, is doing nothing really isn't an option. The road is in a state of disrepair to the extent that we're spending. Maybe you can remind me how much money to just patch potholes and maintain it on an annual basis.
Council President Brenmo and council members, my pothole crews, a third of all of their time is being spent on this road, which means they are not pothole patching the rest of the city because they are working on this road. It is deteriorated to a point where we're going to have to make some decisions here. Delaying it for another year would be, I would not recommend that. The road needs to have a surface that is safe for people to drive.
Okay, and I'm not suggesting we do nothing. Just want to make sure, again, we're looking at nothing. So
Right.
we're trying to piece this together based on the information that we're getting. Ms. Jalali's had her hand up, and then Ms. Yang.
And I wanted to clarify something from my previous question. I mean, I was asking at what are the factors and heard a lot about the different costs and unanticipated costs getting to 9.8 million for just the 2 and then 2 in the other direction. But then it sounded like you said that we were trying to, or potentially were compromising concerns we heard. And I just want to be very clear. I don't think we should make this choice based on people's concerns about traffic, because we will literally never get the roadways we want in our city and like actually shift away from single occupancy vehicle use if we are making planning choices based off that. I think this should be based on technical study we've done, like the work that you've referenced to research the sewer changes and the lighting and all these pieces, and then the money we have. But so I guess I have to ask, is this being motivated in part by some of the public pushback, or is this a pure cost and like landscape analysis of what we have to do? Because I would be really concerned if it was not just based on our technical
Council
assessment.
President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, no. It's interesting that the mayor has been really clear. Quite frankly, this proposal is really a bold move to add bike and ped facilities. It really came down to cost, and proposing to find $9.8 million when we had 3.5 was the tipping point.
Ms. Yang.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to name I am a very visual person, and so I know that you had some documents around and showed us like kind of like the breakdown of where expenses would be. But I'm wondering, can you actually create a document where it shows us the different scenarios of like, here's how much this scenario would cost, and 2, 3, 4, 5, and actually like show us the breakdown of what you would be spending that on? And I know you probably won't be able to do that right now because you're already here, but is that something that you can actually like send to us in the near future?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Yang, we can certainly see if we can pull that together within the next week. I think we'll have some high-level things to talk about the 3.5, the 5.2, the 7.5, and the 9.8, to sort of do a high-level breakout of those items. We can certainly provide that. I'm looking at, yep. We're happy to do that, and we'll do it ASAP.
Thank you. Ms. Naker.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that this is a bold proposal. I share the mayor's enthusiasm for bold action. the mayor also really values community engagement, and I share his enthusiasm for that too. And one of the things that I'm struck by is how much this plan has changed just in the last 6 months as we've thought about it more fully. And I'm glad that we've taken that time to really think this through. I know we do robust community engagement for things as straightforward as a stop sign, a bike lane, a crosswalk. And so I'm really curious to know more about what the community engagement plan, you described a little bit about what the tactics might be, but what is the conversation, what are we going to be asking people to weigh in on in the engagement that you described happening? And will decisions be made after that point, or are we really making the decision when we vote next week? And in that case, is it information or is it really engagement?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, we will be sharing information about what we plan on doing to be able to answer people's questions if they say, well, how do you think it will affect this? Or what do you think will happen there? I really do want to be careful about saying that this is, we want to get feedback because there may be some things that we will have not anticipated, that we should always be open to that. I want to be careful that we don't present it to the community as you can pick. You can do a 2-lane, you can do a 3-lane, you can do a 4-lane, because what we'd like to advance is a 3-lane conversion here. And so hearing people's concerns, making sure that we can answer those questions, provide information, I think is very, very important. So it will be both informational, but hearing about things that, making sure that we haven't missed something that we can address through some of our mitigation efforts, or simply providing information. I do think that because this proposal has evolved, people just really want to know what exactly is the road going to look like, and when are you going to do it? And that's part of what we will provide to residents when we go out on an informational meeting.
Ms. Prince.
Ms. Landry, I really appreciate what you just said. It's sort of the issue that we have in community engagement all the time, where is this a done deal? But I do want to be clear that the council has to vote on this and approve these changes to the program. So the community process also informs the council. What the community says to us influences the way we decide to vote on this. So that community that needs to be engaged are our bosses. And so for me, I'm very supportive of this vision for Ide Mill, but public process is really important to me. And in the history of Ide Mill Road, process has been problematic over the years. So I just want to say that I definitely could decide to vote differently based on whether or not the community feels strongly about this proposal, whether they feel like they've been listened to, whether their concerns have been incorporated into our planning. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that the mayor presents something which is a done deal and basically we are expected to rubber stamp it. I mean, the community needs to know they're our bosses and they inform our decision making. So as long as we still get to vote on it, I don't want to act like the results of any community process is a foregone conclusion.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince, we have a little bit of a timing issue. On next Wednesday, the 5-year plan will be before you, embedded in the bonding document. If you don't approve that next week, we will do no construction for 2020 in anywhere in the city. That is our opportunity for bonding. What we have committed to, and it will be in writing in your resolution next Wednesday, is that the final financing plan for the financing of this configuration will come back before this council for approval. If you don't approve it, it won't go forward. But But the 5-year plan is embedded in the bond documents, which will be before you in 7 days.
Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I recognize there's a lot of details to sift through for this new version, so I'm just, while I have you here, going to ask all my questions. So could you clarify, because we're looking at different financing sources to make the 3-lane and trail version possible as a proposal, what proportion of the overall bike plan fund is supporting this? Because I am confused about where we landed on it. So that would help me understand.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, the current thinking, and that's part of why I wanted to say the financing plan will come back to you, because I'm hoping it will be adjusted, okay? Right now, remember, out of 7.5, 5.9 million is all bonding dollars. It's just the financing source to repay portions of that we're looking for your approval on. Out of the 1.7 of the 5.9, right? So we have $5.9 million in bonding.
And then
You've
1.7 debt service, yes.
Right,
Go ahead.
you've already approved general fund dollars for debt service for the 3.5. Then we have 1.7, that gets you from 3.5 to 5.2. That 1.7, we are proposing to use the bike ped fund. It's an annual allocation of $500,000. We would use $204,000 of that annually to repay that $1.7 million of debt service on that portion of the bonds.
So is that $204,000 annually out of $500,000 annually for all projects citywide? Did I understand that right?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, yes.
Okay.
We use that $500,000 to install bike lanes, to maintain them, things like that.
Okay, and sorry, my brain is ahead of my. So
Ms.
I want
Jalali,
to. Yeah.
just before you leave that point, how many years will we be allocating $204,000 of the bike ped to pay off that part of the bond?
Council President Brenmo and council members, 10 years.
Okay.
Unless we advance finance something else and take it off that.
And
Ms. Jalali.
have we looked at things like? I think that our efforts to get to a really important trail that's part of a bigger regional connection matter a lot here, and so that's why I'm asking, because I'm trying to balance that against what we're trying to do citywide. But are we looking at things like the recent sale of the Spruce Tree parking ramp or other revenue sources we have to repay the debt, given that, you know, it's hard to get to a point where you're taking a significant portion out of the citywide fund to do projects to then service a project that is very important in its own right, but sometimes can come at a high proportion. I'm just trying to get my head around that. So what other things have we looked at that haven't been yet talked about here?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Jalali, I don't often suggest other departments' financing sources to finance public works projects, so that's part of it. I did talk to Interim Director McCarthy about some ideas for how we could finance this, and we decided that we would finance it internally within public works. Because I don't know what the other financing sources are and whether or not they've been committed to other things.
Sure.
That's part of the reason why is we decided to solve it internally.
Yep. Okay. I don't have follow-up. Just needed to get my head around all those facts. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I do appreciate the question, because when we're talking, as we know with our work with the CVZ funds, a lot of times when we're talking about economic development and vitality, we're talking about street improvements and road diets and the safety investments and the bike ped. So, you know, perhaps we're overlooking a funding source by not looking to our planning and economic development department when we're doing this type of investment. So I appreciate Ms. Jalali's question. Ms. Naker.
Thank you. Director Lantry, with the timeline that you laid out where we would be making the final decision on financing at some point later in this year, when would we be going out to actually bid for this project? And where would that be relative to when we normally bid? And what does that mean? My understanding is the later we go out to bid, the worse prices we tend to get from our contractors. So when would that be happening, and is that a concern?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, our plan right now is that we would come back for final financing from this council probably sometime in late April. And then we would go out for bid in June. And absolutely, that is not the ideal time to be bidding a project. We have done it in the past years when we've had projects that have been delayed for a variety of reasons. And so you're not quite sure. We always want to get out as early as possible because those contractors then can plan their work. There really is an advantage to going out early, and I acknowledge that. But with our timing here, we can't advance that any sooner.
Ms. Naker?
And just as a follow-up, I appreciate the sense of urgency here, both to do something great for our bike network, to fix Ide Mill Road. It's preposterous, the state that it's in. I supported when we voted as this council to spend the $3.5 million last year. And then I know that there was a decision by the administration to delay to accommodate this plan. I still am left wondering, given the time crunch that you're describing and my desire to do genuine community engagement on this, I really do believe we will learn from doing that. I don't think we should do it just as an exercise in futility. I am wondering why we can't do this work in 2021. I know it is not a long-term plan to continue patching potholes, and I'm not suggesting that this be the indefinite solution, but it seems like it would give us the time to do robust community engagement, to get the designs finalized, to present us with a fully thought out plan, and then to be bidding when we should ideally be bidding so we can make the best use of public dollars next year. I'm just wondering if that is why that is not being considered as an option, or if it is.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, I would not recommend that just because of the resources that it takes on my staff. Even with pothole patching, this last snow, my staff was concerned that we're going to have to close. Last week we closed the road for several hours to patch potholes. And we will just continue in that cycle using undue resources which means the rest of the city doesn't get because we're spending all of our time there. I think to extend this another year and really do a, patching potholes, especially in the winter, is really ineffective because it's a cold patch mix. It doesn't stay for very long. You run a plow over it and it's all gone. And so I would not recommend waiting another year because it is, the surface of the road just will not last.
Mr. Tao.
Thank you. To that point, we've seen numerous times where when we rush through a project, we tend to make a lot of mistakes. And so let me give an example. So originally we approved the resurface road for mill overlay for $3.2 million. And then to our surprise, the plan has been changed to a two-lane southbound, one lane north and south, and it would cost us $5-point-something million. And then now we find out that there are sewer that needs to be done, other types of infrastructure that needs to be done. And so this doesn't give us a lot of confidence that the decisions that are being made are without a proper study, without a proper modeling where traffic would go, where all the real issues are, and yet you want us to support this, and it's hard to support that at this moment. And so can you explain what the progression, why are the changes, what kind of data did you use? And I'd like to see those data.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, I'm not quite sure what sort of data you'd like me to provide. I will tell you that when we estimated the cost at $3.5 million, remember Ide Mill Road was in our 5-year plan for a mill and overlay in 2021. When Woodlawn Jefferson opted out in December of 2018, we didn't have enough time to engineer a full project, and we didn't want to leave that money sitting on the table considering the condition of our roads. So we advanced Ide Mill Road because it was just going to be a mill and overlay.
But
so
why do that in a vacuum, though?
Pardon me?
Why do that in a vacuum when there could be a community process?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, because we normally don't do a process for our mill and overlays, they're on our 5-year plan. And so we advanced it because of the condition of the road, and then brought that change before the council in 2019, March of 2019, because we wanted to get to it sooner. Having brought to our attention the 2009 resolution that talked about adding bike and ped facilities, the question was asked, can you take a look at this and what are some of the options to do it? I will acknowledge to you that the way that we got to today is not ideal. It's not our practice, but we are where we are today. And so we're looking for financing to meet our project goals on this. We have a timing issue because of the bond sale that is upcoming, and the 5-year plan that needs to be embedded, and included in that needs to be project descriptions of what we're going to do. So we need to know what we're going to build to put it in the 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the email that I got was through the Freedom of Information Act, where a resident pulled that information. And in the original, you seem hesitant for this proposal of shutting down the southbound lane and making the northbound north and south. And then there was another email right after that you seem to went 180 degree and support it. But what is the reason for that change?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, considering I send probably 200 emails a day, in the thousands that I've sent since then, I'd have to take a look. I have absolutely no idea.
Just one more question. In here, you said that basic traffic modeling was done and concluded that this project will have less impact on traffic than the 2-lane proposal. I've asked for those information last week, and I'm just curious, can those be public so that we know what actually took place?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, there's no attempt here to hide information that we have and can provide. As when our consultants did the work on Ide Mill Road, they do some basic traffic, where is the traffic going to go, where is it going to back up? We can certainly provide that information to you.
Sure. And so how much do we pay for that?
The consultants, 25% of the total project cost right now. I believe our contract with our consultants is about $1.1 million.
So $1.1 million, you're willing to pay that out, but a $200,000 full traffic study, it's too much.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, it's also a timing issue. For a full traffic study, would take certainly more than traffic modeling. It would delay the project even further and into 2021. I should also, I know that the numbers, it's like, what do you mean you pay $1.1 million for engineering? That's what we pay on all of our projects for everything that we design in-house. We charge ourselves at our engineering fund. That's how much engineers cost to engineer a project. In this case, capacity-wise, we had to use a consultant. So this, in no way do I want you to think that this is something different, that engineering costs are out of line with what we normally pay. This is what we normally pay.
So in the your basic traffic modeling here, did it include the 500,000 people that were coming to the Midway in its modeling?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, I'm assuming you mean 500,000 people over many months. Yep. I don't know that they included that in the information because I don't know that they know what percentage of people access the stadium through Ide Mill Road.
Yeah, so I mean, it just sounds like we don't have conclusive data here to go ahead and support this proposal without thoroughly doing a study that include the demographic, the different changes that has happened.
And just, we're not voting on anything today, so it's a good opportunity to get this information, and then we'll be able to consider our actual actions, just kind of reminding us that where we're going to end up here today is really just if there's follow-up information that we would like Holly to follow up with and get before we have to vote on the 5-year plan, we can do that. And then also the follow-up vote that we'll take when the engineering study is done. Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. I'm not, I understand we're not voting today, but I think it's important that Director Lantry really have to seriously consider that it's not ready and it shouldn't even be on the bonding.
I appreciate that. Ms. Yang and then Ms. Jalali.
Director Lantry, I have a question. So let's say, like, for example, that we did support the proposal that you had, and in April, which is the time that you said that we would be doing, like, public engagement, like, how would you respond if our constituents came to us, like, you know, really riled up and there's, like, pushback on our decision to support this?
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Yang, unfortunately, we get pushback on our projects on a fairly regular basis. It doesn't mean that we don't do them. That is a policy decision for you to weigh, whether or not it meets your policy goals. We understand that the decision is made by this council on the financing for this project, and in no way am I suggesting that we would take that away from you. What we hope to find out, because we want to do the community engagement probably the beginning of April. I'm assuming the financing plan will come back to you sometime the end of April, the beginning of May. At that time, you would approve the financing for this project or not.
I just wanted to follow up. I think that it's really, I have a lot to think about, because I heard you say that if we don't support this and we go with, like, the norm, which is just patching up potholes again, which is something that has been done, like, year after year for a very long time, it makes me have a lot to, like, ponder on. I think that the reason why we're in this situation right now, like, just to name the truth, is because we've had, like, very irresponsible people elected into office who actually are not prioritizing, like, fixing up our neighborhoods, our streets, and conditions, and that's why we are where we are. And it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of burden to hold, especially as, people who are here supposed to be listening to the community and putting them first, rather than actually, like, just sticking to maybe plans that actually are not inclusive of the people that we represent. And so that's, like, where I'm where I am right now. I have a lot to think about. And just for the record, like, I'm curious, can you share, especially for folks who live in the east side, maybe for a majority of them who actually do not travel on Ida Mill Road and don't use this route at all as their way of commute, like, why should they care about this?
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Yang, as a lifelong East Sider, I don't care about this road. What I care about is the road system, because if we took that tack, there's a lot of roads, right? We have over 1,800 lane miles in the city of St. Paul. Eventually, we hope to get to all of them to repair them. If it's based on how often I drive on a road and whether or not my tax dollars go, I have to look at it as a system. And so for our system that carries a lot of cars, it makes sense for the system. And the way that we do our prioritization, and that's why Ida Mill Road came up. We wouldn't be having this conversation had we not had the opportunity when we had the money that got freed up from Woodlawn Jefferson. This project got advanced only because that project was canceled at a time when everybody is complaining about road conditions, that we would have left that money from that project sitting on the table. Especially with our mill and overlays, there are projects that get advanced because of the deterioration of the road. Even though our 5-year plan, we really want to be disciplined with it, there are times when there are sections of road that deteriorate faster than we can keep up with them. And then we move them up in the plan. So we want to have some of that flexibility. Ida Mill Road is a perfect example of that because of the resources that were being spent to maintain the road. So at that time, I understand it's really easy to say, geez, we should have done it all differently. Yes, but at the time we made the decision that I still stand by, which is advancing the work of Ida Mill Road because the road is in such horrid condition. So why should everyone care about it? Because and is part of a road system. And I hope to think that in St. Paul, we have a broader view that it isn't just about my street getting redone and to heck with everybody else, that it really is a system. And, bikes and peds can come from all over. There are folks probably not from the city who might use it as a transportation, as a way to, ride their bike to the stadium.
Thank you.
Ms. Jalali.
I just think it's important to lift up that I do know, and many of us here know, this has been a long-running policy and planning conversation that has been exhaustively studied, that has been exhaustively discussed. I spent personally all of last year talking to folks in the neighborhood who wanted to talk to me about it. The engagement isn't just, here's a session, there's a session. It's the listening we all do as part of our jobs every day. So I disagree with the idea that there's no basis or policy that precedes us to try to move toward a vision for bike infrastructure. I know that you understand that. I just think it's worth stating here because it was discussed for so long just now. And I would secondly really, really emphasize that irresponsible governance is I think a reductionist way to think about how we got into this position of our citywide road network not being where it needs to be. I think that we actually have designed our entire city and our society around cars, and we have made land use decisions that prioritize cars over people and homes and the environment, and it means that we are paying 3 or 4 times as much as we ought to because we have not kept up investment in mass transportation, in public transportation everyone can access, in road design that prioritizes people. We are just now on the other side of a massive trash fight where for years our trash trucks were ripping up the streets, and we made an effort to try to make that better so we didn't have so many potholes, and then we had to have a fight about that for years. So I guess it's just, this is less about what we're trying to talk about here and more just the ideas that come up in this conversation. Like, we didn't get here because of not being willing to patch in potholes or do enough planning. We actually are fighting to get to the world we want, where we have a different, more innovative roadway, and conversations like this are illuminating just how stuck we are. So I'm still gonna think through what these questions mean for how we're funding it, because this is new for me also, and it does diverge from what a lot of advocates have said they want, but I just needed to contextualize this discussion because it's just been a little difficult to listen to people's analysis for how we got here today.
Ms. Danker.
Thank you. I agree with what Councilmember Jalali just said about the world that we're trying to build, and I think that's part of what I'm struggling with here, because we're talking about taking 40% of our dollars that we have for bike and ped and diverting that to this one project for the next decade. And I'm someone who's been fighting to complete the sitting unfinished Capital City Bikeway downtown and numerous other bike lanes throughout my ward. And I'm trying to understand the implications of this decision on the future for bike infrastructure citywide, which I think we've been talking about a little bit today. The last policy that this council took in 2009, more than a decade ago, on this roadway was to request a study and public engagement on what's being proposed without the study and the public engagement. And so I think there's been some misinformation about what the policy of this council was most recently. It was asking for a study and public engagement. So we are diverting from that policy now. And I'm really trying to understand when, as Councilmember Yang said, we have been going year after year patching potholes and it's not desirable and I don't want to do it anymore, but why suddenly there's this sense of urgency that causes us to throw out the normal values that we put on actual process. We can't just do community engagement when we think we're going to like what we hear back. And I'm really honestly struggling with that, and that was my question about the reason why it's so urgent this year, why we can't just do the process right and do it next year when we'll also get better value for our dollars.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, I think that advancing this road when we did to 2019 was, even that was probably a couple years too late. So every year that we delay this, we are spending more and more resources on that road. Certainly the process on this was not clunky. I would also suggest to you that the stacks of engagement that have happened on Ide Mill Road for decades has been extraordinary when I think about the resources that have been spent on environmental impact studies and engagement. I don't know that we will learn a whole lot new. about what we're proposing on this road. What the contention has always been is the traffic will go somewhere. I don't want it in front of my house. And so we are trying to change a little bit of that paradigm, because I do think some things have changed since then. And what we know about traffic in neighborhoods, right, we're going to change the, spoiler alert, we're going to change speed limits in the city of St. Paul to reduce the speed of traffic. At some point, if somebody decides to hop off Ide Mill Road and wind their way through a neighborhood where they have to stop every other block and go 20 miles an hour, at some point that is going to be less convenient than finding another route. And so I also worry about all the traffic Mageddon that people think are going to happen, and very, very seldom does it come to fruition. One of the things that has been a real issue, I think, with this road and figuring out sort of where the traffic is going is that I do think people's behavior in many respects changes. Part of that has to do with technology, and part of that has to do with, right, if you see that a road is congested, your navigation will just send you somewhere else. And so I think there is an opportunity for us to say, if there are cars coming from the south that are simply pass-through traffic in our city, that they will take a different route that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to wind through at 20 miles an hour for miles on end. And so traffic will go where they think it's most convenient. What we find every time we do a traffic change in the city of St. Paul for a construction project or anything else, the detour, like we put up detour signs, people follow them, most people, and then they figure out pretty quickly, why did they pick that route? I'm going to find my own route. And it is really, really messy. When we do traffic changes on a road reconstruction, my phone rings off the hook the day after, because people are like, you better fix this. You're going to have, it's going to be a mess forever. And what happens is traffic finds a different way. And so with Ide Mill Road, I think there have been changes in our road structure and driving behavior that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to take every side street to get from Mendota Heights to Roseville.
Mr. Tao.
Thank you. To what Councilmember Jalali said, that we need responsible government, and absolutely, this is an opportunity for the city to be responsible and transparent and go through the thorough process that have been described in the 2009 resolution. If doing anything else, it's we've taken what we have seen today is facts of several missteps that have gotten us to this point, from different proposal to this proposal now. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple months from now you come up with another, or you or someone else would come up with a different proposal. And so I don't think it's ready. It's poorly planned, and that we need to have the engagement prior to any votes.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, I believe the 2009 resolution called for a supplemental EIS. That would be a very long, protracted, and expensive process that is not budgeted. So it would have to be included in the 2021 budget, which means then the project wouldn't happen until 2022.
Good. Thank you.
And I think I appreciate that comment. One thing I wanted to add is that I've heard people bemoaning the offset of the $204,000 of the $500,000 for bike and ped. I agree, 41% of that, which $500,000 is not enough for bike ped anyway. But rather than hand-wring about it, I think the other thing is we need to ask ourselves, is $500,000 enough? And maybe instead of just looking at this in a deficit-based way, we should be thinking about how much money we want to allocate to bike and ped infrastructure as opposed to how much is being chiseled away. And so if we would like to do a very robust engagement and traffic study, and I remember the acronym you just said, then that would have to be something that we budget for. And taking it aside for a minute, when this project happens, I just think that everything that we're talking about has a cost, whether it's time, whether it's money, and we have to own that part of it. In addition to the values, there's a cost to it. So I the part that I keep writing down is this $500,000, and I just want to say out loud, it's not enough, even without 40% of it being allocated to Hyde Mill Road. I struggle, I generally support the idea of Hyde Mill Road. I actually really appreciate that what I wrote down as Plan C that you've brought forth today, that is a way to move forward, still create the bike ped infrastructure, make it less expensive than the 9.8 that it would cost to do the full project. But it is frustrating to me to think that we often end up in the situation where I don't feel like we have much of a choice because of the street bed infrastructure needing to be replaced, or the cost of not replacing it adds up over time. But I am concerned that we continue to pour a lot of resources into certain parts of the city and not other parts. And in this one in particular, the one thing that really concerns me is that we're building more infrastructure when the infrastructure we have isn't even being maintained and taken care of. And I'm concerned about Summit Avenue. I'm concerned about Lexington. I'm concerned about the bike ped plan or path around Como Lake, which needs to be redone. So I do have some concerns of when I think about that, but then I also believe that if it is a true value and we are trying to move forward with a different model of our public works infrastructure, that we have to also match it with our dollars. Other comments? Ms. Naker.
Thank you. I just want to ask Director Lantry, based on the conversation today and some of the really good conversation and the questions and concerns that have been raised, I feel really backed against a wall when I think about this being part of the 5-year street plan. I think the choice between everything that we might possibly do on any of our streets and Hyde Mill Road or nothing is really putting us in an impossible position next week with this information being shared today. So I am wondering if there is any conversation or desire, or based on today, any recommendation that you would make in terms of being able to take Hyde Mill Road out of that voting process, so that the choice is not Hyde Mill Road and every project next year, or nothing.
Council President Bredmo and Councilmember Naker, this project will be included in the 5-year plan. That's our intention as of today. And I would also suggest, having been on that side of the table, I understand this worry that it's like, well, it's got to pass next week. You have to vote right away. I absolutely understand that not wanting to put you in that position. I really, really get it. The timing of this, right, we had originally talked about doing this in December. But because we were doing budget and people wanted to be more thoughtful about it, we got to today. And so I think the timing of me coming to what was supposed to be an org meeting was simply a matter of timing when there was available time to put it in the schedule.
Well, I want to interrupt you and say it wasn't just people who made that request, it was this council who did not want to vote on this as part of the budget.
Yes.
So we made that request, and part of being backed up against the wall is by our design. And I don't think that we wanted to be backed up against the wall, but just to be clear, we did not want this to be pushed through as part of the 2020 budget.
And Council President
Which
Brennan,
it typically would have
yep.
been, and that's best practices. Yep. And we specifically pulled it out and asked for a presentation and some sort of a process before we voted on this.
Council President Brennan, yes, and it was the right decision for you to make at the time as well, right? Because there were plenty of other things going on that you didn't want to rush through something else. I totally understood that. It didn't, right? It's a best practice. Maybe we can do it at the end of this year to do it for coming years. We hadn't been doing it in December. So it was just information that bond council had shared. So, right, we're at today because of a series of events, including, right, the reason why it's messier than usual, and it probably will be a lesson for us going forward, is advancing projects likely will not happen in the future because we wanted to get it done. We found out late in the game and didn't want, with the desire for so much road work in this city, to just say, oh, well, I guess we're just not going to do a project and leave money sitting on the table. Didn't make sense at the time. So this isn't our practice. This isn't how we do business usually. This road has been discussed ad nauseum for decades, and the plan has been to put bike and ped facilities on there. And so this was an opportunity to be able to do that, and that's how we got to today.
Did you have something?
Yeah. You know, I appreciated that we did not do the 5-year plan as part of the budget. But if we had done the 5-year plan as part of the budget in December, it seems to me we would have been at the 2-lane, $5.2 million budget price. So in the last 2 months, we've now added 2.3 million to the project. So again, to the point that we're making here, this is a moving target. This is really a moving target. And when I asked questions about this earlier on, I was sent the 2009 resolution that says we'll study a 2-lane option, a 4-lane option, and no build, not a 3-lane option. So again, the 8 Mill Road ad nauseum thing, 8 Mill Road is a long-standing controversy in the city. There hasn't been a resolution to the problem. And what has come forward since you wanted us to vote on it the first time is a whole nother option. And I can probably get there and support it. But we haven't done the traffic modeling. We haven't considered the fact that Selby and Snelling has become a major mixed-use node that is next to our new stadium. And nothing affects affects that neighborhood more than Ide Mill Road. So I guess I get where you're coming from, and I really respect it, and I really want to do smart streets on Ide Mill Road, even though I represent the east side, because there are some of us who want smart streets on the east side too. And when we see it happening here, then we can make our case to have us added to a future 5-year plan. But I do think that we need to be very clear that if we had voted for this the first time, it didn't look anything like what you're bringing us today.
And you'd be coming back for more money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Tao and then Ms. Jalali.
I just want to clarify. So you're saying that you're not going to take the 8 Mill Road out of the 5-year plan that we'll be voting on? Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Council President Bredmo and Councilmember Tao, it is part of our 5-year plan as of today. I expect that it will be included in our 5-year plan when it comes before you next week.
So even after all the questions, uncertainty that we raised, I just think that that's arrogance, and that it's immature when there's still a lot of questions for us to dig through. And I think the proper way to govern is to get to the table and figure out how to make it work.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao, that we did do a walk around with all 7 council members to explain what we were doing, what the financing was, and I realize, that having it's something that you can reference to sort of absorb, because it's a lot of moving parts, and I'm happy to provide that.
Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Prince.
I'm okay. I'll pass.
And maybe this is a question for the city attorney, but do we have the power to amend the 5-year plan when it comes before us?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince, I would suggest that is a question for the city attorney.
Okay.
And we'll have Holly follow up on that. And I guess I don't know if there's support around this table, but I really do appreciate Ms. Jalali's question about, does this have to all be fully funded from within Public Works? Is it an economic development investment? Is it something where we can spread the love to other departments? Because I think that this kind of investment goes far beyond the scope of just a Public Works project. And so if there's a possibility in one of our, I think Ms. Jalali pointed out the ramp sale or other investments that have come full circle, then maybe that's something that we can look at that brings this price down. I guess it doesn't change the question about the public input that some folks around the table are asking for, but I do think it helps bring the price into more of what we were expecting it to be. Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Naker.
And to quickly add to that, it is because of traffic and congestion reasons that I think we should aggressively look at how to make a trail possible here, because the connection, I think we talk about this road a lot like by itself, and it's actually part of a long-running community effort to connect Minneapolis and St. Paul through a bike network that would go across the river through Midway. It would directly take people to and past Allianz Field. It would mitigate a lot of the car traffic because we would be connecting people between cities as like an actual commuter route. But this road is a key leg of it. And so I know that there's a lot to just get your head around when it comes to how do we use our bike funds smartly. The equity concerns about where in the city that's happening are really important. But I just want to lift up the point that because I do see it as an economic development priority, that this is like a major thoroughfare potentially for bike commuters across our cities, and it's just going to be a multi-phase thing. We have to think about it that way. So there's just a bigger picture here at play for me besides just the one road, but we always talk about it like the one road.
Ms. Naker.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear in what I promise will be my closing comments on this, that I think it's so easy to lose the gray and to get black and white about these issues. And I want to be clear, I really think this is an imaginative and innovative, bold, intriguing proposal. And I agree with Councilmember Prince. I think I could probably get there too. But I also believe that we really genuinely have a lot to learn when we go out and ask people for input on these things, apart from the fact that they're also our bosses. As a great example, we've been doing months, years of engagement on the Capital City Bikeway right now. We know we're going to do a bikeway. The question is not whether, it's how. And we're learning a lot from doing that process. And I think we've really put ourselves out there and been open to a lot of engagement on that process. I'm asking for something similar here. And I think to Council President Brenmoen's point, when I asked for us to not do this decision during the budget process in December, it was because no public process had been done. And so the point was we shouldn't make a decision on this until public process has been done. Now no public process has been done, and we're in February, but we're in the same position we were in December when I asked for us not to take the vote without that process. So I just want to be clear about what I was saying about why I wasn't ready to vote in December. I'm in the same place right now.
Ms. Yang.
Has there ever been public engagement done around this, or no, around IDMIL?
Council President Brenmoen, Councilmember Yang, I'll send a cart over with the information about yes, it has been discussed. To be fair, has it been discussed robustly about what condition the road is in and the environmental impact study that was done and completed in the late 90s? Probably not. At that time, it was without any concern about traffic, what came out of that was to do a linear park, was to close the road. Right? And there was no commensurate, well, where's the traffic going to go? That was the result, was that the road should be closed and a linear park should be built. And I don't remember a hue and cry at that time for anybody saying, well, are we going to do a traffic study as to where the traffic is going to go? It was, and that's part of what we're doing here with all of our bike plans. We know that when you have a reduction in road width, someone is probably inconvenienced. What we're trying to figure out is how do we make it safe so people have an option to walk or bike, and that all of our focus is not on how quickly can we get a car through our city. That is not the lens we use anymore. And so this, I think IDMIL Road is an iteration of that to say, yes, we believe there will be traffic impacts. We also have prioritized that cars may have to be inconvenienced for a little bit longer. It's not going to cause massive traffic jams. People will be inconvenienced. I was thinking about it on my way into work today, right? It's like, I don't know where all this traffic came from, but boy, my usual 6-minute commute to work took me 10 minutes. Ugh, how irritating. It's like, well, there was congestion, and it took me a little bit more time in my single occupancy vehicle with a controlled environment that I have a license for. And so there is congestion, and our roads at certain points of the day all over the place. And it is that inconvenience it's different to be inconvenienced for 4 hours at a time stuck in traffic versus it took me 4 minutes longer than normal to get into work today. And so I think part of what we're doing is really thinking about what we're trading things off. We may reduce a traffic lane that will cause congestion for something else, but that's a trade-off. That's a policy that we're making that we would rather make it slightly more inconvenient for a specified period of time for cars than for another mode of transportation and give people the option.
And Ms. Lantry does have, I mean, you have compiled the information about the history, and I think it's a fair question because, while Ms. Prince may have been here as an aide during the time period, Mr. Tolbert and I have been here since 2012, and we have never talked about Aid Mill Road. It's something that our predecessors discussed ad nauseum, but we haven't. Yep. So I think that's really good context. And the other thing that I want to reiterate that Kathy did say today, but just to put it in context specifically for the folks that are newer to the council, is that we had an unusual opportunity with state bonding money because one area of our city decided to gather petitions and opt out of their street reconstruction project. They didn't really opt out, they just kicked the can down the road, right? You have to do it at some point.
They opted out.
Well, don't they go to the end of the list, eventually?
They go to the end of the list.
So I appreciate that Ms. Lantry and her team were attempting to be nimble and to take those resources and apply them to a road that had no house addresses on it.
Right.
Ide Mill Road. It's kind of an anomaly in our city. There's a few examples of this, maybe Pierce Butler or Shepherd, those interesting roads, but it was an opportunity that was like, wow, this project's not going to move forward, but we have this money, we can advance this, and this road is falling apart. And so I feel like it is sort of a struggle sometimes because it's hard to be nimble. In city government or in government because we want to do process and we want to do engagement, but I also I want to lift up and respect the fact that instead of just not spending the money, because we so desperately do need this infrastructure rebuilt, you found a way to do it. And I think that's the tension that we've been in as the council is the desire by some community members to have more engagement on this, and then this pot of money on a project that really needs to move forward. And that's really what I believe we're struggling with here. Ms. Yang.
So my question is, let's say in April we do the public engagement, what are the specific things that you would like to get input on from the community then? Is it you're asking them, do you like this plan? Should we move forward with it? Or are you asking them, hey, help us craft the plan or make it changes to it?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Yang, our intention would be to do it like we do other road construction projects. When we go out to a community and say we're going to redo your roads, we don't say, well, what do you think? We come with a plan, and we want to hear input from somebody who says, but you know what, I have a driveway apron that's a double and I only have a single car garage now, so can you close that up? That sort of thing where we can really fine tune our plans. So I really do want to be careful about this, that we're providing information because so many people, because the plan has changed. So we want to go out to the neighborhood and say, here's our plan and what we hope to do. Here's what it would look like. Here's our timing. If we absolutely will be open to taking that feedback. Have you thought about this? We also want to be able to provide some information. Somebody's going to say, well, what are you going to do if there's all sorts of traffic on Randolph or whatever? And we want to be able to answer some of those questions that people might just have as information that we can share.
Ms. Prince.
One of the questions I had when you came to talk to me in my office about this was, if we're voting next week on the 5-year plan and it includes Ide Mill, why can't we start that community engagement process sooner than early April? I guess I'm not clear on why we're waiting a couple months to do that. Secondly, I just want to correct the record because I'm looking at the final EIS of Ide Mill, and it says the preferred alternative will result in an extension of Ide Mill to St. Anthony on the north end and a permanent connection to I-35 on the south end. While my particular council member supported the linear park when I was a legislative aide, the final EIS did not recommend that.
Thank you.
But my question is, why can't we do a more meaningful community engagement process that isn't just we're going to have a meeting in early April and then vote 2 weeks later? Because I think that kind of schedule just reinforces the idea that the public input is kind of a last minute thing that won't probably have much of an impact.
Council President Bredmo and Councilmember Prince, part of it is we want to get as much information as we can by that time. If we can figure out to do our traffic modeling before that time and share that information, we just think we'll have more information at that time to share with the public.
All right, and as always, I mean, there's a few very specific follow-ups. I know Holly was feverishly typing away during the meeting. If other questions come up, please funnel them through Holly. And I ask that just to make sure that we all get the answers to people have had great questions today. This has been a great discussion, but just want to make sure that things go through Holly, get to Ms. Lantry, and then back to the whole council so that we can hear the answers to those and understand where we are as we move into the 5-year street plan and bonding vote next week. So it looks like it's a wrap. It looks like it's a wrap, so I appreciate the information. It sounds like you are going to follow up at least with a print up of, or a write-up of the numbers that back up the information you gave us today. I think it was just a lot of information to get kind of on the fly, so I appreciate your willingness to follow up on that, and then other follow-up questions will come from Holly. So thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate you being here and your staff and team. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for giving us this time.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. If there's nothing else to come before us, and I do not believe there is, we are adjourned.